Hi, welcome to Restrocast. Today, my guest is Phil Friedman. He's the CEO and chairman at Salsarita's Fresh Mexican Grill. This was one of the most inspirational conversations I've had till date. Phil, started his food service journey as an officer in the U.S. Army in Vietnam in 1969. And from there, contributing to planning and building chains such as Chi-Chi's, Pizza Hut, having a noteworthy contribution to life of great chains like Panda Express, to building McAllister's and selling it, and then resetting to take Salsarita's Fresh Mexican Grill to where it is today. After these many years and after almost checkboxing every possible success in the restaurant space, when I asked Phil that why is he still doing it, his answer was, that's what I do. I do restaurants. This was personally an inspirational conversation for me. I'm sure you're going to love it. Welcome to Restrocast. Hey, Phil.
Yes,
welcome
sir.
to Restrocast.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Phil, you pack 4 decades plus
That's correct.
journey, in the restaurant space.
Yes.
But, I would like to, start with, your early years, and then how did restaurant as an industry or as a business happen to you?
Okay. It's interesting because I've had food service in my background without I didn't even realize it. So my first job in high school was being a dishwasher. And it's interesting in the industry, you find so many people who are first dishwashers.
Yeah.
So, but kind of more important is I was a Vietnam era college student. So I was ROTC, and I became a first lieutenant and wound up in Vietnam. And long story, but I was a food distribution officer in Vietnam. And at 21, I was running a food distribution business that today would be valued at $40 or $50 million. Right. And it just came to me. That's the way it was. And so, okay, that was nice. I
So how did that happen? Like you were a part of, what was this about?
Okay, so I'm a quartermaster officer, University of Connecticut. And I picked quartermaster because I felt I had choice. I was a distinguished military graduate and decided I liked that was more of a businessy type military term, military occupational specialty. And so I went to Fort Lee in Virginia and studied all the different quartermaster things, and then wound up being sent to Germany first. And it's interesting, there weren't many senior officers, so as a second lieutenant, one of the jobs I had was I was the clubs officer for Central Germany. So I said that there kept being these food service things that came in my life. So I actually had the club's responsibility and a lot of other responsibilities. And then one Saturday morning, I was the administrative officer, I opened up the mail and I got my orders to Vietnam. So what happens so that you go to Vietnam, at least in support, and then you get an assignment, right? And I was in Long Bend and waiting for assignment.
This was which year?
What's that?
Which year was this?
Oh, this is 69.
69, yeah.
Yeah, so I go there and they said, you have, logistics training, but didn't have food service. But they sent me to Saigon, and I ran the distribution center in Saigon for 3 months. And then a lot of challenges, a lot of control, right? And one of the things I was proud of is I didn't give food away because there were a lot of food was given away, not correctly. I'll just say it that way. And then because I met a colonel there who thought I could do a good job, he asked me if I'd go to the Delta and straighten out a mess in the Delta distribution center. And actually, it's a big personal achievement in my life. But it would take, when I got there, it would take the people who were picking up and these are mess halls, so a sergeant or an officer, it would take them 8 to 12 hours to get their material and go back. Well, they had to go back through enemy territory, so they were going back at night. So by the time I left, we got that process down to 2 hours. And
Wow.
and I was 21. I was just figuring it out on myself. There was no manual. It's just that I created the concept of truck checkers, and getting pre-orders together, and it was just interesting. I really got to love the distribution business, right? So put that aside, because I get back from Vietnam, and I got into actual manufacturing supervision, which was not food service. It was running a manufacturing plant and folding cartons. And then I decided I needed to really become a student of business. So I went to Wharton, got an MBA. And when I got out, I stayed in the packaging industry, but I was recruited about 12 months later by PepsiCo. And this is how I got into restaurants. So PepsiCo recruited me, and I had the option of working at their corporate headquarters. I didn't want corporate headquarters anymore. I'd done that. Yeah, I was a financial business planner. Or Frito-Lay, which was kind of bigger, but they had just acquired Pizza Hut. And I thought, for where I was, that was a small acquisition. So I joined Pizza Hut, and they had a group of planners, and I was director of financial planning for 3 groups: international, new products, new concepts, and then distribution. And in those days, the larger food service companies had their own distribution network. Eventually, as
this was for Pizza Hut International.
This is for Pizza Hut International, right? It was headquartered in Wichita, Kansas, and in those days, if you were a franchisee, it was really neat. You essentially had a building shipped to you, and then it was assembled, and they had 10 distribution centers, so you got all your food for Pizza Hut. So I did all of the planning for the distribution, and I really liked that a lot, and I almost became a distribution manager. But I had another opportunity. The founder of that's my first introduction to restaurants through the financial side, right?
Wow. Okay, that was what year?
That's 69, 70 now. So I got out. I did 69, and then I got out in 70. Got my MBA a couple of years later, right? So it was the middle of the 80s when I got to Pizza Hut. I'm sorry. I'm gotta get.
Yeah, no, I saw that your Wharton was 87.
Yeah, right. And then from Wharton, I got into eventually the Pizza Hut.
Got it.
So, the answer to your question earlier, long answer is I got into restaurants through large multi-unit chains that were in the financial side, owned by Pepsi, right? And then Frank Carney was one of the founding brothers of Pizza Hut. He got the Chi-Chi's franchise for the East Coast. One of the senior vice presidents I worked for became the president of that company for Frank, and he asked me to go along with him as the controller. So this is an interesting story. I didn't have any accounting courses. I was an MBA in marketing. So I actually used an accounting ledger book. I learned accounting by doing it. I became a controller. But I was one good lesson. I hired a great bookkeeper. So she would do a lot of the work, and I would tell her what my thoughts were. But it was really good. We built a number of restaurants, and eventually, this is on the franchise side. So by franchise, part of my also a lot of franchise experience. So we had the Chi-Chi's franchise on the East Coast. Eventually, we sold our company to the parent. I became vice president of planning with Chi-Chi's. Okay, and Chi-Chi's was a growth stock. It was really progressing, a lot of growth, and it came to pass that I went a little sideways with the chairman on what the right strategy should be for growth. So I left and tried to, I left. I had a buyout because of the deal. I had a buyout of my contract, and I took the time, but I eventually wound up at Marriott. And I worked for Marriott Corporate Planning for restaurants. In those days, Marriott still owned the Roy Rogers chain, the Big Boy chain, full-service restaurants on the East and West Coast. So I did the planning and they owned because Big Boy was on the West Coast, I spent a lot of time with the different businesses in different places. Heavy franchise, I got heavy franchising. Big Boy was 1,100 restaurants in those days, and I really enjoyed the working with the business unit leaders and doing their annual plans, and I got to develop a good relationship with most of them. There's always stories behind all this, but I'll keep going. So
no, please, I mean, dive in.
Well, I'm going to dive in, not so much while I was at Marriott, but I did more work for Marriott after I went out on my own. I decided that I was going to try and go out on my own, and I almost was able, and I was looking to buy, with backing from some of the people from the early Chi-Chi's days, I was going to buy the Wendy's group out of Pittsburgh, and they were very good operators. But it was the time when Wendy's decided to do breakfast, which didn't work. So while we were putting the deal together, sales were going down 10%, and the money dried up because nobody knew. So I had to go to work. So I called up my friends at Marriott, and they put me in the consulting business. So one of the fellows I worked with at Marriott ran the old hot shops, which was cafeterias, and Marriott also had the toll roads, which was, as you know, this if you go on the Chicago toll roads, whatever. So I actually did the toll road strategies, and by the time they left, they owned 80% of the category, and it was based on my plan that I did. So he was very happy to give me consulting assignments. So I consulted with the chains I used to work with. I consulted with the Big Boy chain, the hot shops, or the restaurants. But the one that was really good consulting was Roy Rogers, because they were trying to figure out, do we grow Roy Rogers? Do we sell Roy Rogers? Heavy franchise. And we did some really good work. But eventually, Marriott sold Roy Rogers to Hardee's, right? So, but I still was doing the work with the other people. But they were slowly getting out of the restaurants. Like today, they're really not in restaurants. So the fellow that brought me back to help and gave me a lot of consulting took over a company called Service America, which was a in the late 80s was a buyout. That was a merger of two companies, but it was a leveraged buyout. And he became the CEO, and he asked me to do the business planning for the divisions. And then I did. And what does that mean? I would travel. It was $1 billion company. Divisions would be 200, 300,000. We did stadiums, really a big, good business, a lot of contract food service, vending. So I got to learn all that business. And I want to say, as I was doing this, I developed a reputation with people in the industry that I was a very pragmatic business planner. And a number of these situations were turnarounds. And a lot of executives would ask me to help them out of problems. So, and that came to pass in Service America, which is a $1 billion company. I was at the beach in North Carolina. I had done all the plans, working on a lot of stuff. They brought in a young CFO, but we were in trouble financially, and we had to restructure. We had GE Capital debt, and it was a $400 million restructure. And the young CFO was uncomfortable signing a lot of documents and essentially feeling that there was too much risk. So they called me up, Phil, would you be CFO? Because everybody knows you. I said, well, two things. I'm not a CFO, and I know how hard the job is, and no, I don't want to do it. And of course, I relented and did it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
but could you have been CFO? You were not, you're not qualified as, you're not an accountant, right?
Well, no, I'm not at all. So I told you, remember, but I've been a controller of a franchise system. I've been vice president of planning. I was director of financial planning. But the reason they wanted me to be a CFO, I had done all the business plans. And actually, it wasn't bad. I had a really good vice president of finance and a really good controller. And I am really good at working with people and directing people. And a lot of it, because it was a restructure, was cleanup. So we had to deal a lot with bankruptcy, avoidance. It was a lot. And the restructure took a lot of work, a real lot of work. And it came to pass, we got it done. But it took a big toll on me. I think. But and I even said once that and what happens in a restructure, you really have to be intense on the cash flows, right? And a lot of people don't necessarily feel comfortable with that. Somehow, I don't mind crisis, and I had done a lot of turnarounds. So you got to deal with the reality of your cash. And it's a great story because we were in the vending business and it's very capital intensive. And I said, we don't have any more cash to support the business. And then we learned how to do rebuilds versus new machines. And I remember one fellow came to me and said, Phil, we thought you were crazy, but it worked, because we had to deal with our reality, right? Anyway, so
yeah, that's where the pragmatic
that's an interesting
leadership.
insight. That really wasn't a classic CPA accounting firm, but I did it in this situation because it was situational, right? Okay, so I did that, and then while that was ending, I knew I had to look for something else. And what came up, there's always, I was still doing consulting. I'm really three people in terms of careers. One is just an industry consultant expert, and I've been on 12 boards because of that. There's the financial side of the history that culminated as CFO, and then there's the executive running companies, right? And the biggest one, there's been a few small ones where I worked on the consulting and I ran the company for a while, but the big one was as Service to America was over, a friend of mine was became president of Panda, and we had stayed in touch, and he asked me if I could help him with the business plans for Panda. Andrew and Peggy Chern. It's still family owned.
Yeah.
And Joe was trying to.
It's a couple that.
It's Andrew and Peggy Chern.
Right.
Yeah, and now it's the family now, but they own the chain. And so Joe said, I really need to figure out how to work with, in this environment, the family owned. And I said, well, my perspective is work with them and really develop a solid bought-in business plan. So I spent a lot of time working on the business plans for Panda, which really resulted in Peggy Chern eventually asking me if I'd become president, because Joe, it wasn't working for Joe. So Joe left, they asked me, and I said, well, I really have a lot of clients, so I don't want to give up my clients, but I'll give you 90% of my time. And so I still had 3 or 4, well, they're really other boards.
Yeah.
And I kept those, which they were fine with. I was on their board, and I became president of Panda for 4 years. And we kind of redid the strategy. At that point, they were trying to grow anywhere they could in the U.S. with malls. And they were looking at franchising.
Do you remember how many units? 200?
Yeah, they were in the 200, by the time I left, 300, right? But what I did is, the big achievements I was part of is getting Panda out of the malls onto the street. And we call them street stores. So we went through a lot. I actually skinny down the corporate staff because we didn't need everybody. And we took a strategy of, let's go everywhere. We're chasing malls. We found out that the Panda worked in, very high volumes, high per square foot malls, but they were already penetrated. So where's your growth? Well, it had to be out of the mall, right? So we developed a concept called Panda, which was, in the end, too complicated because it was on the street. It was early quick casual. I mean, it was like when people were just starting to use the word, but we were doing too much cooking to order. So it came to pass that we looked at how we were doing, and I suggested, and then they accepted it, that we take the Panda concept from the mall and put it on the street, right? So today there's 1,800 plus Pandas, and it's all the same concept that it was in the Glenside Mall when it started.
So that's so cool.
Yeah, and what's really neat is it hasn't. I mean, it's always evolved, but it hasn't changed that much. So they had a core concept that worked really well, and they just kept going after it, right? And they really kept doing it. So my big achievement was that we got onto the street, that I got focused on development in first California out versus all over the place. Don't franchise. There's no reason to give the business away, and we don't need to raise money because the cash flow is fine. So now it's become extremely successful, right? And then I think there's still control. It's still controlled by the Chern family.
Yeah,
right? And which is great because
which is amazing.
But there was the whole point I had. You don't need to do anything except keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
Right, because everything was so successful. So I worked a lot on I mean, there's new product development we worked on or whatever, but the big achievement was how do we grow? And they're certainly growth oriented, and they put money back in the business, and it's a phenomenal success. So I was interim president because at that time Peggy was she worked for me as the vice president of HR, and I worked for her as vice chairman. So it's really kind of an interesting dynamic. But it came to pass that she would be president, and I stayed on the board, but I was looking around what I would do next because it was 4 year. I think the word I used was it's been a great ride. And a friend of mine, Mike Stack, had been doing some work with an emerging brand in Mississippi called McAllisters. And I never heard of McAllisters. And Mike came to me one day, and he knew Panda was winding down for me. He said, "Why don't we take a look at McAllisters?" So I said, "Okay, let's do this, Mike. I'll go down there. We'll take a look. I've never been and didn't know anything." And when I visited, I saw something that was really strong, and that was it was a brand in the Deep South, but the customers were what I called Eddie Bauer shoppers, right? They were very much you could see these people anywhere, right? And it was good quality food, sandwiches, quick casual, and it was. So we eventually got a deal with the owners, and we said we want to buy the chain, but we need time to raise the money, right? Because I told Mike called me up. I was still at Panda, in kind of this interim level of board and advisor, but I still had an office in California, and Mike said we can buy them. I said, "Mike, we got to do this. We have to negotiate that we need 6 months to raise the money because you and I don't have the money, right?" And he did it. We got the deal, and it was really interesting because we were able to position the acquisition as we were management buying the company, because Mike was working with the company, okay, and they were supporting us, and we raised the money mostly in Mississippi, which was the strategy.
Yeah, because that's where the people knew them. Yeah.
And then we got some small business administration debt. We got some equity from an insurance company. We got a big investor. We patched it together ourselves, and it was kind of neat because Mike and I raised the money ourselves. So we took a management fee. We took a fee for raising the money, which was really great for the Friedman family.
Wow.
My daughter was going to Penn, so I was able to pay her tuition.
That's neat.
Yeah, it was, but we set it up right? We set it up, and I thought, I didn't know if we were able, but the investor said, "No, you did it, you earned it." So we did that. We bought it in '99. We closed in '99, about 25 restaurants. We had to really change what was going on, because I think one of the reasons the chain was for sale is this family owned, and they had signed a lot of franchisees with territory agreements, but they didn't have the support structure. So Mike and I came from the industry, so the first thing we looked at is support, right? And what did that mean? We had to build a training team, and we had to then also have good franchise consultants or advisors that visit the franchise. So what we did is we took some of our best people that were in company operations and then put them in training and then put them in field support. And so you sacrifice the company restaurants for the sake of the franchise. And then one by one, either the franchisees worked out or they closed or whatever. And then once we had built the infrastructure, it took about 12 months or 18 months, and we were still getting growth. Then we went out and we really started selling franchises. And so McAllister's went from the 25 we purchased to, we sold it to Rourke Capital in 05 at about 200 restaurants.
To Rourke?
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah, and then I stayed on as the CEO, even though I had cash. I didn't cash out everything, but I cashed out a good part of my holdings, or I made a lot of money in the first round. I stayed on, and we recapitalized 2 or 3 times, and then they eventually, I left in 2010.
Wow, so, and you left at like what number? Were you still the CEO?
I left, it was over 300.
And you're still the
we
CEO
sold it.
post-Rourke.
Yeah. Yeah, they kept me on. I kept some of my stock. I kept a good share of my stock in, even though I had done well. And so I always say the joke is my wife was very happy. I was still working, right? Then I had more money than not. I was still working. But we set that up. We did that. And then I stayed on and running it, and we kept growing. And where we got into difficulty was in the '09 recession. Right, it was really tough, and we were quick casual. And I always said in McAllister's, I would have to find reasons why people would spend $2 or $3 more per sandwich for us versus going somewhere else, because we were we always, when we did all our work, people loved us, they loved service, they loved the taste. We were too high, pricey, right? So in the but
were the sales really hit that hard in 2009?
Well, that's what I get to. They were hit. They were, and a couple of things happened in 2009 because the recession was pretty tough. We weren't getting growth, right? So I had to. We were getting negative sales. So, but the more important to me is I had to get the customers to want to keep coming. So we actually restructured the menu, and we added. I remember setting out the goal. I wanted an item that would taste great, that people would want to buy, and that would give me more profit. What was that item? Paninis. We didn't have paninis, and we did paninis, and they were a home run. And a panini costs less because it has less protein, right? So you really have less product on a panini. And then the other thing I did is, I don't know if anybody, for all that people know McAllister, they have huge baked potatoes. So people would always push me, could we sell half potatoes? I'd say no. But in '09, I said, okay, we'll sell half potatoes we stole the Panera plan, and we did for two items for so much money, right? So at choose two, you could get a half potato and a half sandwich or a bowl of soup. So we did that, and it was a home run. So we didn't necessarily drive sales higher, but we really improved and we were
the contribution margin
really improved. And that was essential because it was a tough time with the recession. So we were able to, we actually prospered in the recession. It was a restructure of the menu that really made it.
I always wonder, and I don't know, is it just too naive, or I actually wondered that, during recession, is it the sentiment that makes people, consume less? Or is it tough for the restaurant space just because, interest rates go higher, money is not available for growth?
It's a lot of dimensions, right? So from the sales side, what's really hard is the consumer it's a disposable income equation, right? And you asked me when I got involved. I got involved in the still when there was hyper growth of eating out, right? And then now the industry is kind of much more of a mature industry. So you really, the industry grows because of disposable income, right? So for example, when gasoline goes up dramatically, which it did, by the way, in that recession, people have less money to spend at the restaurant. So what does that do? It's not that they eat less, it's where they eat, right? But the big issue is frequency. They may love McAllister's, but they'll go somewhere else less expensive, more, and they come up to us less often. So what I did with the restructuring is I gave a reason to come more often or come back, keep the frequency. So and that I felt very good about that. And I had 3 franchisee groups, because these were all, by then everybody had say to me, if you hadn't changed the menu, we wouldn't have made it. Because
that's phenomenal. That's right? That's such a such an amazing insight.
Yeah, and these are very
and this is not something that's linear. I mean, it's not and most of the restaurants are not able to do that because
you have to really. I mean, we did that on a weekend. We changed the menu, right? But we had enough knowledge of what other people were doing, what we needed. You have to really. It's not linear at all. It's really kind of interactive to a lot of thought, right? If I can get the product right, I can get the cost right, and we're going. I mean, roll forward now to Salsarita. We're going through that in the industry, everybody's raised prices 2 or 3 times. Everybody's seen transactions decline. Everybody saw them come back, but not now. And then everybody's going through the cost of doing catering through Easy Cater, the delivery through DoorDash. So the cost structures are different. So it calls for thinking of, okay, how do I get to margin I need, right? Which is very hard. And for us, it was really trying to improve through pricing and some products change, higher flow through of profitability to cover all these operating costs. But it's very tight. It's very tight.
On road capital, I was. How was the experience of? I mean, okay. Let me rephrase the question that I'm about to ask.
Sure.
Private equity is kind of looks like a necessary evil in the restaurant space, where you need them as partners to grow. You also need them as partners to make the exit and see the cash.
So you look at private equity in a couple of ways, right? So I had a great industry leader said, we used to be driven. The industry has evolved from founders and then first term executive driving the business, very personal, to private equity driving the business. So I think you use private equity a few ways, right? One is for growth capital as a growth partner, and that's what we did with McAllisters, right? Right, because it wasn't a liquidity event. The founders got out when I raised the money.
Correct.
Right. So our reason to sell to Rourke was, the first round of shareholders were willing to cash out. So there was a liquidity event, but not for Phil, right? Okay. So I guess that was, but the other part of that was supporting growth, right? So, but it is there. You're right. There is a component of, no matter how you look at it, somebody's cashing out somewhere, right?
No, but my question is actually on Rourke. I want to know that we see these events happen every day, and more often than what would appreciate private equity play or driving the restaurants actually does not really go very well for the restaurants at times. Especially the brands, where the founders are not at the play, or the people who conceive those brands are not at the play anymore. I've seen road capital being really, really successful in, continuously buying brands and allowing them to prosper. Well, what's going right for Rourke?
I think it's supporting the growth plan, right? Letting the cash flow stay in the business to support the plan, right?
But that's, I would assume that any private equity that will buy a growing chain and is willing to probably, let's say, flip it.
I don't think that other private equity would have so much of a different philosophy, but I think Rourke is supporting the leadership in terms of not demanding, quick paybacks, and they just, they let, I'm using, what's the example I would use? Arby's, right? They really found someone who figured out how to really advertise Arby's, and they supported that because they put a lot more money into advertising than before, right?
Yeah.
So I think it was when
they turned it around.
The growth plan was supported. I don't know if I have a better answer. You probably have to ask Rourke what their secret is. All I know is I stayed. They made me very wealthy, and I left because Phil wants to not necessarily work for people. To be honest, so when I left there, I tried to buy Salsaritas with investors I know. The whole idea was for me to run it, right? And even
so, did you fully exit?
Yeah, I completely exited Rourke. I left Rourke as the CEO, but I still had a lot of shares. And then 3 years later, they completely bought me out.
Got it.
And I was fine with that, right? Because I was fine with that. I was really done with. I was just. They did ask me I want my money right away. I said no. You're going to eventually sell it or grow it, and I'll wait. And I waited long enough, and I did better.
Yeah, that's a great exit.
Yes, yeah. And then Salsaritas, I'm just trying to do it again. We've stumbled a few ways.
So what's the story behind Salsarita?
The reason we stumbled is it was an old brand that had gone through a lot in the recession, And the people who were still franchise, and they had got up to 165 restaurants, and when I bought it, it was like 70, right? And a lot of, then we added new restaurants, kept
No, so
closing
where's the, I mean, if you can speak about that, where's the brand from? How did you
Okay,
how did you chance on
my
it?
goal when I left, I formed the company after I left McAllister's called Mississippi Holdings, LLC. And then my goal was that I would use some of my money and people I knew, and in Mississippi, we would look for small chains that were either still founder driven or, kind of first generation management that were ready that was ready to move on because they couldn't grow it. And we looked at a number of things, and Salsaritas fit that mold.
What were those?
It was founder owned. The founders are still there. They wanted to get out. There was some young management that had some equity in it. They stayed in, but eventually they got out. And I brought in a COO because my plan was I would own it and have a COO. So, but it was because it had been through so much, a lot of the franchisees were really in difficult situations. So as leases came due, they would leave and whatever. My famous quote is, I have about the same number of restaurants that I have when I bought it. I've closed 40 and opened 40, but we've tripled the, I would say triple. We more than doubled the average unit volume. We've done a really good job of growing the brand. And after about 4 years, I said, I was trying to work with what was there. This is not good enough. So we hired a great design team, great architectural team, and I repositioned and reconfigured the brand.
Can I double click on that? Because
Please.
Can you talk about what's the brand, what's the concept, what's the brand like, and what did you do to that?
Okay, so the brand, is it's a burrito. That's a burrito a brand, meaning it's steam table. You can think of Chipotle, but our difference is we do a lot more with salads. We have a much broader offering of fresh ingredients in the cold station, and because of that, our demographic is different. We're heavier women and heavier family because we have more healthier options, and that's the way our sales is. I stayed with the prior decor. Use my hands here. I stayed with the prior decor, and the name, and that was a mistake. So I should have been much more aggressive to change.
The name?
Yeah. So 5 years into it, I said, okay, I got to change this because it's only going to not stagnate. And we created, we changed it to McAllister's Grill and Fresh Mexican Grill. And we did a real decor change with a great designer called Kathy Guyman. And she really understood that we were selling fresh. And so the decor is light, white walls, a lot of green lettering, a lot of feeling and image of this is a place that has fresh food. And that's what we did. And the other part of it, and I wasn't slow on this, but it was very hard, is the technology was way behind. So as we tried to fix it, we were learning as we were going, and we made some mistakes with who we used. By 97, we had figured all that out, and we were going, and then we really had everything in place going into 99. We're having a great year, and then, then the pandemic came. But so I look at Salsaritas as two eras: the era of what was that didn't go so well, and the new Salsaritas, which I called it the new Salsaritas, which was really taking off in 99 and the beginning of 20. So and then in the pandemic, because we had our IT stack in place, but it was just early for us. We were like, what the quote of the pandemic was 2 years of development in 2 months, and we were one of those. We were working with Olo. We got the online figured out. We got DoorDash figured out. We got we like everybody else invented our own curbside. We had no idea what that meant.
Yeah.
Great curbside story. So we had a restaurant next to a concept that had drive-thru, right? So people were stacked in the drive-thru. So I said, we had a creative manager. He put a table out, and he put boxed lunches on the table. and he said, "You get Salsaritas."
Oh.
Right? And that became what was the beginning of curbside. But that was just the manager who said, "I can sell to these people because they're waiting forever."
Yeah, so
Yeah, and then of course we learned how to do curbside.
So now are you opening Salsaritas only beside restaurants that have drive-thrus?
No, that's a good question. No, we're trying to do drive-thrus. So the other thing is we were just had same thing. So much of the new Salsaritas we introduced drive-thru, and we had 3 really successful ones, and then we went into COVID, and they became great. We had opened one during COVID, and they did really well. You know, and drive-thru is tough because what we had to do is say, people who use drive-thru are drive-thru customers. So it isn't that they're going to be going down the line and say, give me this and give me that. They're going to have to know what they want, or they read the menu, right? So we said, let's just get to be drive-thru. We put a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 menu together, just like a burger place. And the number 1 is the highest selling burrito, meaning a chicken burrito with beans and, you know, what in Spanish rice, and so 90% of the people buy off the menu. So we were able to get ticket times at 90 seconds, which is pretty good. And we prepackaged the
90 seconds is great for a drive-thru.
Yeah, and we prepackaged the bag of chips as a side. So we acted like drive-thru, right? Now some people said, well, I really like to get this, this, and this, and we say, well, pull aside, we'll make it for you. But the great success was 90% did that. So we now today, as we look at, if you like a Salsaritas, you can get a standard end cap, which we like, with a drive-thru or without, because it is tough to find drive-thru sites. Every time we would look for drive-thru, Starbucks would take it, right? And I can't blame the landlord for preferring Starbucks, right? So, but we kept trying. So we, coming out during the pandemic, the one we opened was a converted Starbucks that's only 1,800 square feet. And so we've got Salsaritas of, we'd like you to be 20 to 22, but you could be as low as 18. They have 2 of those that are drive-thrus. And then we have a lot of older ones that are bigger.
Yeah, in general, what's the
24.
24.
But, and that's what I said, it would be 2,000 to 2,400. We prefer to be on the lower side. And in terms of seats, 40 to 70, right? And the 2 small drive-thrus have 40 seats. The smaller prototypes. But we really don't need them, because we don't need many seats, because the sales mix now is, with or without drive-thru, catering is 20 to 30%. So that's off premise. Third party or online ordering that's going to the customer is 25%. So you're already at 55% not a restaurant. Then in terms of ordering Salsaritas, another 20% is takeout, meaning they order, they come and take it out. Curbside used to be a big percentage. And then
But this is order ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, it's order ahead.
Like
pickup could be order ahead or take it out, but either way, you're not staying in the restaurant. And then people who actually sit down are about 30%, 20 to 30, depending on where you are.
And where's the drive-thru with this?
Well, with or without the drive-thru. So those are the percentages. The drive-thru, it's interesting. The drive-thru, it would be more of like the takeout would be, right?
I mean, is drive-thru still...
Drive-thru for us is 20 or 30%. When we have drive-thru. It's accretive, it does add.
But do you still look for drive-thru stores?
Yeah, we do, but it gets very competitive to get a drive-thru location. But we're not overly growing now. So part of Salsaritas today is we're not growing. We're about to reemerge, and the reason I stopped in the pandemic, we weren't franchising, and so I stopped trying, and I don't have a salesperson now. And I don't really aggressive, but we're working to get all of our numbers together to go start franchising again.
So right now, you have how many locations?
75 today.
75.
Yeah.
And what's your franchise versus?
Okay, 8 company restaurants. 8 company.
8 company.
Yeah, and of the 8, 2 will become franchise restaurants.
Got it. But that's amazing. And where do you see this going now? What's the plan?
Salsaritas or the industry? Okay.
Salsarita. Salsarita.
No, Salsarita, we're going to grow again because during all of this, and as we turn the new Salsaritas, we've increased our sales volumes dramatically, right? We actually did grow during the pandemic because we got so good at third party. And now catering's come back because catering was one of the laggards that come back, but it's come back strong. So our top third restaurants do about $1.6 million, and you can make a lot of money at $1.6 million, especially the smaller square footage. And we are flexible, meaning we're not trying to get the best. We don't have to have the primo site because so much is off premise. So we're as we start growing again, we'll start looking. We had moved away from inline restaurants, but if we get in the right neighborhood and the right center, we can do inline. Well, that'll open up a lot of growth opportunities for us, and we can do 2,000 square feet, not the bigger stuff. So a lot of like many people, a lot of our future is off premise, and we have a really good IT stack now, so we can really support either direct online or through third party online.
You mean your own brand online?
Yeah, I mean our webpage is really good. If we go direct, we can order direct through our POS system. So. If you want Salsaritas, you can go to Salsaritas and order online, or you can go to one of the third-party aggregators. Where we are, all of it flows into our POS system.
Yeah, that's
it's really good, and all of it's been a lot of hard work and evolution. Yeah, I'm blessed with a young, smart team. I just have to listen. They do it.
So this is the investment that you made in the technology that was pre-COVID,
or into the mid '90s, going into the end. We and I personally invested a lot, meaning because I didn't take money out of the business. My partners didn't, and we put money back into the technology.
Phil, what keeps you excited? This is when you're still talking about Salsaritas, I can clearly see that. Like you can see the future, where this is going. But what's the excitement every day? What's keeping you
I know
busy with the restaurants?
What keeps me excited is progressing and seeing that we.
But haven't you done this too many times? You already know this. Isn't it boring? No. Like how the numbers work and how this will fall into place.
I think it's not boring because it is a new challenge, right? Look at after the pandemic, we started looking really strong, both sales and financially. And I wasn't going to use a bad word, inflation came, right? And a whole bunch of other stuff for no reason, but that's all not my control. So all of a sudden, the challenges almost seemed worse than COVID. And then we had restaurants we couldn't open because the workers weren't showing.
Correct. Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So all of these, it gets very tough sometimes to live with it, but it's also challenging to overcome it. So I like business. I really like business. I like trying to figure it out. And I think that there's something about restaurants that someone asked me similar question. And I said, well, restaurants is what I do. As a fellow that's a big investor, he likes me, we talked a lot. And I thought about that. I said, I could stop. I've done it, right? And I said, but I really like it. And I think the other part of it is very personal. I want to leave Salsaritas, which will happen, at least with having got to a successful point, right? Because because of the pandemic and then I think 2 years of craziness with, all the government spending that created all this dysfunction in the labor markets, and then the inflation, and frankly, the supply chain availability. Packaging. Someone asked about. We just remembered that packaging was whatever you could get.
Yeah.
And we used Gordon Food Service, and it's a strategic type alliance. And Gordon was great. They would find stuff. We would do short-term contracts, but it was every day of trying to make this thing work. And for me, it's supporting my people doing it. So it gets frustrating at times. It gets, why am I doing it at times? But it's what I do.
Did you ever, I'm sure you have had, having these offers where, you could have gone to the private equity side as well, post your exit from McAllister's.
Yeah.
Why not? Like, building is still the tougher road and it's slower. But
I think you have to be introspective, right? I had a few kind of neat opportunities, and one of those with a private equity firm, and I really, and I'll tell you a story in a minute about why, but I just don't want to work for someone. I could work with people, but I really prefer not to work for someone. So and that means I take risk and I put my own money in, which I have. And I remember when I was a young man, and I was talking to my mother about my father, and she said, one thing, he just doesn't want to work for anyone. He wants to be his own person. And I never really reflected on that until I thought about why I...
Now I can see that from your journey, right? because especially the Panda story, I mean, you worked with, Andrew and Peggy, like in the conversation I can hear that you were one of them, like you were...
Yes.
Your pod was three of you.
Right? Yeah, it's interesting because it's very much, people ask me if you work for a family. I said, yeah. So you had to work with Andrew and what his goals are, Peggy, and you got to try to understand both. And then it comes to pass, then just Phil, right? And so it gets so complicated. But yeah, I like making decisions. I get into trouble sometimes. I mean, I go too fast, or even in the military, when I was an officer, I was much better in Vietnam because you just had to do stuff, right? There wasn't a lot of bureaucracy, right? And I liked it, and I succeeded, right? And they asked me, why don't you stay in? And I said, this is a crazy answer. If I could stay in Vietnam, I would stay in another year, but I don't want to stay in Vietnam. I didn't want to go back into structure. It's very much me.
But I mean, and I'm asking this question a little selfishly as well, because though I run a tech company in the restaurant space, but I do wonder at times, when I get offers to sell the company, I do wonder that what next? What else am I going to do? And that time, I have two answers. One is I'll start another tech company, or I am going to probably become an investor, buy tech companies that are already working, right? My question to you is that you don't want to work for a private equity because you don't want the pressure of bringing returns to somebody else's money. Makes sense. Mm-hmm. But even putting your own money, why not, why pick a brand and, kind of just, build it the hard way instead of, there's so many brands that have management teams. Brands are doing, okay, and they're ready to break out. And with your, understanding of, numbers and planning, you can probably flip them faster.
Well, I think that, if you have a brand that's kind of there but can go next, it isn't that easy to impact the next step. You have a successful brand that's growing, but you can envision that they're not nearly where they could be. But it's very hard to convince the owner, the stakeholders, that this is great, but let's do this. Because
something is working for them already.
Yeah, and you're just another guy. It doesn't matter what you were, you're just another guy, right? Another person, I should say, because it isn't gender specific. It is. So for me, I wanted to be able to be in control. Same thing, right? Now, I didn't do a good job because I'm not where I want to be, right? I just want to finish well, right? But I'm also very happy I did it. Because I worked, I tried everything I could. I think I figured out what has to be done, and we'll get there. So even though we've had failure, in my mind, it isn't over. It's just okay, I got to deal with it. But I think I'm answering your question that for me, I just wanted to find something where, while I was using other people's money, it was very high net worth people. I said, look, here's the deal. I'm putting my money in, and I'm in control, and they went along with it.
What do you, anybody who is an entrepreneur, an entrepreneur in the restaurant space, what advice do you give them today? Yeah, like somebody who's, let's say, in their mid 40s or 30s and running in the restaurant space.
Well, I really think first, if you make sure you have the organization that you need, right? It's so hard to get bigger and better without organization. And that's really important, because you have to have faith in the organization, but more importantly, you have to have people who could deliver for you, right? In our age, you have to really have the technology figured out. You have to be in the game, right? Because technology is evolving, but if you're in the game, you can evolve, right? Where I had to do is, I was in that transition point where technology that we had was way out of date. So we tried to make it better, but we didn't. We just made mistakes. But I do think you got to really work to get your technology right, even more so. It's going to be more so every day.
Phil, this is absolutely inspirational.
Oh.
And I draw so many, so many things that I believe in, but with somebody like you, they just got more validated.
Thank you.
Thank you for this chat. This was absolutely brilliant.
You're very welcome. You're
Thank
very
you.
welcome. I enjoyed it.